I'm blessed. I work hard. I wake up every day and do what I love.
Brandon Elliott Boston Jr., born November 28, 2001. Brandon Boston Jr. is not a bust. Depending on who you talk to, that statement may be true. Same as it may, there's an opposite side that feels the former high school McDonald's All-American, top 5 player and number 1 overall shooting guard in high school should have lasted more than 4 years in the league before it completely gave up on him. But that's the thing about expectations. They don't care that he's still making money playing the game he loves and still has a chance to return to the league just having turned 24 years old. Expectations only noticed that he couldn't last, and mainly for these reasons. What happened? Let's talk about it. It's your boy JC Stunted Growth. Let's get it. Take a minute to like, subscribe, and comment on who I should do next. Brandon Boston Jr. is a 6'6" shooting guard from Norcross, Georgia, who entered high school basketball as one of the most gifted scorers of his generation. After establishing himself as a national name at Norcross High School, he transferred to Sierra Canyon in California, where for many, including myself, expectations were high. Sierra is a powerhouse program loaded with elite talent and constant national attention, especially at the time. Even in that environment, he stood out. Boston was a consensus 5-star recruit, a McDonald's All-American, and widely viewed as one of the top 5 players in the 2020 class, finishing as the number 1 ranked shooting guard in the country. As a senior, he averaged 19.7 points and 7 rebounds per game, showcasing a smooth 3-level scoring package built on shot creation, deep range, and advanced footwork. On the Nike YBL circuit prior to that season, Boston elevated his profile even further, averaging 22.8 points, 8.1 rebounds, and over 3 assists per game against elite national competition. Scouts praised his length, scoring instincts, and ability to get buckets without forcing the action, projecting him as a modern NBA wing with star upside. By the time he committed to Kentucky, Boston wasn't just another top recruit. He was expected to follow the familiar path of elite Wildcat scorers who use Lexington as a shortstop on the way to NBA stardom. But his lone season at Kentucky didn't go as expected. Neither did his time on draft night, falling to the 2nd round, setting up a streak of unfortunate occurrences. Stunt number 1, Kentucky changed how scouts saw him. When Brandon Boston Jr. arrived at Kentucky, the expectations were familiar: score, stand out, and move on. The program had built its reputation on turning elite high school wings into immediate NBA prospects, and Boston fit the mold on paper. He had length, shot creation, and a scorer's confidence, but once the season began, the gap between projection and production became hard to ignore. He averaged 11.5 points per game and struggled to convert consistently from deep at 30%, numbers that stood out for the wrong reasons for a player known primarily as a scorer. Against SEC athleticism, his thin frame made it difficult to create separation or finish through contact, and when his jumper wasn't falling, his overall impact faded. Games where he flashed his shot making were followed by long stretches where he struggled to assert himself, creating doubts about consistency. Context mattered, but perception rarely waits. Kentucky's roster was young and disjointed, spacing was inconsistent, and Boston also dealt with a knee injury that limited his explosiveness for stretches of the season. Still, Kentucky isn't a program that cushions reputations. When players dominate there, draft stock rises. When they don't, weaknesses get magnified. In Boston's case, scouts began focusing less on upside and more on limitations relative to NBA wings, defensive physicality, and whether his scoring would translate without a clear athletic advantage. What hurt him most was how the season reframed his identity. Instead of being viewed as a plug-and-play scorer, evaluators started asking harder questions about his role. Could he defend consistently? Could he impact games without the ball? Could his skill level overcome the lack of physical presence? Those questions followed him into the pre-draft process and replaced the optimism that once surrounded his name. By the end of his lone season in Lexington, the conversation had completely shifted. Kentucky didn't take away his talent, but it exposed how thin the margin was between high school dominance and NBA projection. And once that margin disappeared, his draft stock followed. Stunt number 2, the draft slide that took away his margin for error. For Brandon Boston Jr., the 2021 NBA draft wasn't just a disappointing night, it fundamentally changed the terms of his career. Entering the season, Brandon had been discussed as a potential lottery pick or at worst a mid-first round selection. By draft night, that conversation was gone. He slid all the way to the second round, eventually being taken 51st overall. And with that slide came a reality most fans don't fully appreciate. Second round picks don't get time, patience, or protection. The moment Boston fell out the first round, the expectations flipped. Instead of being developed, he had to prove he belonged immediately. There were no long-term plans, no investment in ironing out weaknesses, and no safety net for inconsistent play. Second-round wings are evaluated possession by possession, mistake by mistake, and if you don't defend, rebound, or clearly impact games without the ball, the leash is short, especially for a player whose value was always tied to scoring. Boston entered the league still trying to rediscover the version of himself that existed before Kentucky. But the NBA didn't need another thin-scoring wing searching for rhythm. Teams wanted to find roles. Could he guard multiple positions? Could he knock down open threes consistently? Could he play without the ball in his hands? Those questions followed him from camp to camp, and each unanswered one chipped away at his standing. There were flashes. He showed shot-making ability, confidence, and occasional scoring bursts that reminded people why he was once so highly regarded. But flashes aren't enough when you're fighting for survival. Every missed rotation, every forced shot, every quiet stretch mattered more for Boston than it would have a first-round pick. The margin for error was already gone. He entered the league at a moment his archetype was replaceable and his draft status made him expendable. By the time he began to adjust to the speed and physicality of the NBA, the league had already started looking elsewhere. The draft slide didn't end his career, but it stripped him of the patience needed to rebuild it. Stunt number 3, he never found a role the league could trust. By the time Brandon Boston Jr. reached his third and fourth seasons, the issues was no longer talent or opportunity, it was clarity. The NBA had seen enough to know what he wasn't, but not enough to fully trust what he could be. And for fringe players, that uncertainty is often career-ending. He entered the league as a scorer, but the league never fully bought into that version of him. He wasn't strong enough to punish switches, not explosive enough to live at the rim, and not consistent enough from deep to demand defensive attention. That left him in an awkward middle ground, too skilled to dismiss outright, but not specialized enough to rely on nightly. Coaches weren't sure when to play him, how to play him, or what to expect possession to possession. For young wings trying to survive, defense and reliability often decide everything. Boston showed effort, but his thin frame and average lateral quickness made it difficult to guard stronger wings or quicker guards. He wasn't a lockdown defender, nor was he a disruptive one. That meant his minutes were almost entirely tied to offensive production, and that's a dangerous place to live if your offense is streaky. The role he needed never fully materialized. He wasn't a primary scorer, he wasn't a floor spacing specialist, he wasn't a defensive plug-in, and in today's NBA, players who don't check at least one clear box get cycled through quickly. Younger prospects arrive every year with similar skill sets, more athletic pop, or cheaper contracts. The NBA doesn't wait for clarity, it replaces uncertainty. What makes Boston's situation frustrating is that he did adjust in small ways. He moved the ball better, took fewer forced shots, and tried to fit in within systems rather than force his game. But those improvements came quietly, without the runway needed to reset his reputation. By the time he looked closer to a functional rotation player, teams had already formed their conclusions. This wasn't a dramatic flameout, it was a slow fade caused by role confusion in a league that demands definition. And once the NBA decides it can't trust you to be something specific, it becomes incredibly hard to stay. All in all, Brandon Boston Jr. leaving the NBA wasn't the result of one moment, but a gradual realization that the league never found a role it could rely on him to fill. Still just 24 years old, Boston hasn't stopped playing basketball. He's continued his career overseas, staying active, staying sharp, and doing what many former NBA players have done, rebuilding their value away from the spotlight. History has shown that a path back to the league does exist, especially for wings with size and shot-making ability, but those opportunities usually require reinvention, not reputation. For Boston, a return would likely come only if he proves he can impact games without needing the ball, defend consistently, and embrace a more specific role. Whether that door opens again or not, his story reflects how thin the margin is between elite prospects and expendable players and how quickly the league moves on once it's made up its mind. Salute, much respect, but for these reasons, his growth was stunted. It's your boy JC Stunted Growth, and I'm out.